Thank you for still tuning in with us in these conferences. And we are now in our day 3 of the Community Builders Conference in conjunction with Global Community Builders Summit 2020. It has been co-organized by the International Islamic University of Malaysia and also Philandure.
It is sponsored by Bank Islam Malaysia Berhad, supported by All Party Parliamentary Group Malaysia and also CSO-SDG Alliance. Thank you again. So now we are in our third slot for this session for today. And we are going to have Mr. Q Jayao, who is the co-chairman of the Bar Council Environment and Climate Change Committee. He'll be speaking on governance and risk management. So we are going to have like 35 minutes of presentation by Mr. Q. And then we are going to open up a bit of Q&A session from the floor. So you might address it well. You can type it in the comment chat box within the Facebook page. And then from there, we will pick it up and ask directly to Mr. Q. So I think since we are a bit behind time, I now straight away pass to Mr. Q to start the session. Please, Mr. Q.
Thank you, Fikri. It's a privilege, pleasure indeed to join all of you. Very good morning to everyone. And thank you to the organizers for this conference. And I really commend you in terms of the focus on capacity building aspect for the voluntary sector. Needless to say, I'm sure by now the other speakers would have emphasized the importance of the actors in the voluntary sector, in the non-profit sector in terms of nation building, because it is a very important role that you play. Now, in playing that role, the private actors, it is important that you stay your course and that you, because it is hard work. And mission drift and all types of other challenges can come to play, and challenges, but also opportunities. And so I'd like to talk about governance and risk management in the face of challenges, but not just challenges, but also in the face of opportunities. And so I hope governance can be seen, as well as risk management can be seen in that the two sides of things, yeah, because the opportunities and challenges, they come very often hand in hand. So in the little time that we have together, I would like to talk about governance and risk management, these two large bodies of study, and get into the heart of these two areas and focus on that for our session today. And that is on decision making. Right, because decision-making is a key component, if not the heart of governance. Decision-making is also at the heart of risk management. And it is, I think, relevant, perhaps in the context of the voluntary sector, civil society organizations in Malaysia. Yeah, so let's talk about decision-making, yeah, in that for this session, yeah, from the context of governance and risk management. So decision-making, so I'm focusing on decision-making as opposed to the operational side of things, yeah? So if you were to think about your own NGO, your own organizations, what is it that you're busy about? What is your busyness about? You can, if you analyze it, describe it as there's a big part of it, which is decision-making. You're making decisions all the time. And then the other part of it, you can say you're executing and implementing these decisions. Now, for the purposes of our discussion, let's talk about the decision-making processes. Yeah. So not on the operation side of it. That will be our discussion today. So that's what I mean when I say let's focus on decision-making. And I hope for this session to be as interactive as possible. And so put down your thoughts in the chat function or the Q&A function as we go along. So right off the blocks, I want you to start thinking about the decision-making processes in your organization. Yeah, and I'm talking about the non-profit setting. Yeah, you might occupy different types of organizations. You might be a private sector, for-profit type of organization, but then you also volunteer in a non-profit. So I'm talking about the non-profit organizations here. So put on your thinking hats now, if I can suggest, and think about, let's identify the building blocks in terms of decision making. Yeah, because I don't want this to be just me telling you. I want you to come along with me in this little discussion. Yeah, and I would like to hear from you as well. So let's identify the building blocks of how organizations, your organization, makes decision. So first activity, let's think about what are the building blocks. Can you think to yourself now, who makes decisions in your organization, right? So who makes decisions? Now think of it not in terms of, oh, it's Ali that makes decisions on this, it's Jenny that makes decisions on that. So when they come together as a body, according to the process of your constitution, that becomes a decision-making organ.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Sorry, we
Yes.
are having some glitch program just now. Perhaps you can share.
Where did you lose me?
I think the first governance and risk management on how we should be joining you in doing this activity. Building. Yeah.
Okay, Fikri. So I'll start over again then. The activity when I started, you didn't catch me just now, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to focus on the decision-making aspect of governance and risk management. Yeah. Okay. So decision-making aspect as opposed to the operational side, right? Because, well, I think both sides you have a lot of action, but let's focus on decision-making for purposes of today, right? So decision-making happens at all levels of your organization, but let's think about that now in more tangible ways in terms of you, the audience, in terms of your organization. Let's go into that right now. Yeah. So I want us to go into a little activity right now. If you have pen and paper in front of you, that's even better. You can start writing your thoughts down. Right. Sure. Now, I would love for you to write down in your organization, in your nonprofit, in your CSO, your civil society organization. Let's identify the building blocks for decision making. All right, sort of like the Lego pieces, if you will. So, firstly, let's think about who makes decisions. Right. So, who are the ones that makes decisions in your organization? So, think in terms from an analytical angle. Yeah. Think of the organs, not the personalities, not like, oh, Alex makes decisions about finance. Oh, Jenny makes decisions about, human resources. So don't think in terms of personalities, but think from a more analytical angle, because that's what this session is about, of which are the organs in your organization that makes decisions.
Right.
On your paper, you probably have got Jawatan Kuasa, your society's committee. That is a decision-making organ, right there. Right. So if you have that, congratulations. That would be the one if it is a society, but there are others. What other organs are there that makes decisions in your organization? Right. So you might have subcommittees. Right. So that's another organ, another class of organs that you might say. Now, some of you might have written members. Now that would be actually partially correct. Members also make decisions, but not any member, because that's just one person, but the whole body of members when they come together in a general meeting called according to the rules of the constitution of your organization. Then it becomes a AGM or an EGM, right? That's the annual general meeting or the extraordinary general meeting. Then the body of members of your society, they become a decision-making organ, right? So now you've got on your sketch pad, we've got Jawatan Kuasa, we've got ahli when they come together in an AGM or EGM. So these are the core, right? In terms of who makes decisions. Now let's go to the next. Identify the next building block. what types of decisions are made? All right, what types of decisions are made? Think about categories, all right, and just jot them down, so that as you do this, I hope that you start to build a clearer, a mental picture about the decision-making processes in your organization. So what types of decisions are made? Categories. Financial decisions, right? Budgeting, right? Talent acquisition, right? Who to get, who to keep, who to hire, right? What kind of donors do we engage with? Who do we market and promote our work to, right? How should we do our communications strategy, for example? Right, these are all decisions, and there are lots of decisions, right? What kind of activities are we going to do in the year ahead, right? Because we need to then plan for our resources. So these are all the types of decisions as you're writing them down, right? All organizations, you will have your emphasis on different types of categories, but it's good to have a list of sort of the categories of decisions that you make. Excellent. So as you're doing this, it'd be great if you share them as well with us in the chat, and that would be helpful, yeah, and for others to see as well. Now, for the next building block, how are decisions made? That's a question for you. It's like, how are the decisions made in your organization? Very often as well, what's in your mind? You might say, well, actually, our decisions mostly happen on WhatsApp, right? Or at our favorite mama, right? Downstairs. And these are all correct answers, but think some more. Is there a procedure? Is there an SOP around it? Yeah. How are decisions made would go around your questions of who's invited to the decision-making table? Who is invited? How much lead time do you provide, right? Do you say, hey, let's decide that right now? Or, hey, let's decide that tomorrow, let everyone know, and then we'll get together and then we'll discuss. What's your process? Think about that. And if you can, try to describe that, right? So that you get a clear and honest picture about how your organization makes decisions. So process. Who is at the table? Now that your answer to that question also will hint at who is not at the table, right? And is there a time? Do you let people know ahead of time? Can they prepare? Can they get their hands on relevant information, for example, right? And then do they have a clear idea about the agenda? What's the context of our meeting, of our discussion, right? So what are your processes, right? So think about that. Now, next building block, think about what are the key inputs for decision-making that your organization does, or what should be the key inputs, right? What are the key inputs? So key inputs would be like, well, if you're making a budget decision, what are the key inputs you'll be looking for?
History, spending history.
Yes, exactly. So spending history, what's in our bank accounts right now, right? What's about to go out? What do we need to pay? Or what's about to come in, right? The cost of projects, did we get relevant quotations? How many quotations did we get? These are all key inputs, right? Is this a fair price? Is this a reasonable estimate? Do we have enough information, right? Key inputs, right? Are there relevant people here at the decision-making table, right? Key inputs. Now, this is an aspirational question. What do you think are hallmarks of great decision-making, right? What do you think a good decision-making looks like? Yeah? Jot them down. Yeah. We've touched on some of them already, right? Like having key inputs, like having a good and predictable process for decision-making, right? What is a hallmark of great decision-making? What could be on your sketch pads, I wonder, right? is a hallmark of good decision making, everyone is happy? Is that a hallmark? Is that something that we look for in terms of having, deciding whether you made good decisions? Everyone is happy? Or when there's a lot of arguments, then is that a hallmark of poor decision making? Yeah. So that's a question posed to you. Think about that. Think about that in the context of what happens in your organization, right? Or from what you've experienced. Yeah. What are the hallmarks? Now that we've done that first part of the activity, I want you to think now a little bit about the obstacles and the critical success factors to excellent decision making, right? So have we touched on some of the obstacles to great decision making? Can you think about them from what we laid out earlier in those Lego pieces, right? So what are the obstacles to great decision making? Stay with me, because as we go through this very short exercise, it provides a context. It will give us a good foundation to discuss about governance and risk management around decision making in the next part. So think now, what are the obstacles to great decision making? What gets in your way? What stands in your way? Right? So what are the things that could stand in your way? And then the next question is, what are the critical success factors for great decision making? Now, critical success factors is just it's a fancy way to say, what are the key conditions that need to be in place in order to achieve great decision making? Yeah. What are the key conditions that need to be present? What is a critical success factor? So what's important for great decision making? What do you think? Yeah. What do you think? So can you identify that in your head, right? So what have you got? Now, I'm looking at the chat. I don't see anything coming in. So yeah, it would be good just if you just share some of the things that you're thinking, so that then I have an inkling, yeah, of where we are at and whether what I'm talking about is relatable and relevant to you.
I think there is some question if you want to address. I received one. They said the question is, personally, governance and risk management are quite jargon in nature because of the need, especially to those community builders in the social development sectors, the NGOs, NPOs, CSO, and whatnot. So what kind of interventions that we can do or propose as stakeholders in order to enhance the awareness on this agenda?
What kind of interventions? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. This is something we think about all the time. Yeah. How do we move into a prevention mindset and proactive mindset rather than just reacting? Because most of the time people talk about governance and risk management when something bad has happened, and then they say, we need to improve our governance, or we need to improve, or we need to have risk management frameworks in place. Yeah. So that's being on a back foot, being reactive to the challenges that will come as you do your thing, you know, as a non-profit. So, but that's very risky. Yeah, that's very risky behavior. That's like driving without safety belts. You know, it's like driving without adequate brake pads, for example. So governance and risk management are concepts which are very fundamental to protecting your organization. So I would like to, from that question, I think it's a very relevant question. I would like to bring us now to the key principles, perhaps, the foundation stone on governance as well as risk management. Yeah, these the two aspects that we are talking about today. And I wanted to just discuss that in the angle of decision making, yeah, so that at a higher level, if we have an alignment on these important principles, important fundamentals, then in doing what you do, as you go out there, your team goes out there to do your hustle, then you keep everyone safe. You keep all your stakeholders safe. That is key. Yeah. So let's talk about why are the concepts of governance and risk management important. Now, it's to keep people safe. People who? Your stakeholders. All your stakeholders, and the thing that is bigger than all your stakeholders. Let me unpack that. So who are your stakeholders? Well, there's the team in your organization. These are the volunteers, right? These are the founders of the organization, and all the passionate doers, right? Who are determined and who are big-hearted, who have turned up to support the cause. Now you need to keep them safe. By that I mean operationally, yeah, ensuring that the things run smoothly. You need to also protect them in the sense that their efforts and their sacrifices do not go to waste, i.e. they contributed, and you want to ensure that, because everyone is contributing parts of the whole thing. So you want to ensure that everyone can do their part so that it all comes together, and then the end product, the end effort is larger than the sum of its parts. And then you achieve something that is quite wonderful. Now, very often, sometimes when a lot of people put in their sacrifices, but someone else along the line, because he or she is going through a difficult time, and therefore he or she drops the ball, and then the project fails. This happens all the time. And is it, is it enough to blame that one person who has dropped the ball on that occasion? You know best, right? So from an analytical angle, it is, do we design so that we minimize the risk of our teammates dropping the ball? Do we design for, and I'm going to use a jargony word, do we design for resilience, right? They say resilience. So resilience is like bamboo, where, you have challenges, you have, wind and storm, but you don't break, right? You adapt to the situation. So as a team that is together and resilient, when a critical member of your team faces some challenges, maybe at home, maybe professionally, right? And therefore that person's bandwidth becomes limited at a certain time and is unable to deliver what the person has committed to do voluntarily, yeah, in your context. And so that's what I mean by dropping the ball. What happens then? Does the team have enough capability to respond to those situations? Because let's be real, those situations, it's not about if they will happen, it's about when they will happen, right? Because we are all human beings, and we will all face challenges that will have impact on our individual bandwidths, our ability to do what we do. And so when those bandwidths shift, as we are humans, we would appreciate if people could give us a hand. We would appreciate if there are systems in place that would step in and ensure that, we're not going to fall below a certain line, right? So governance and risk management is really crucial. That's what I mean by in keeping people safe, in protecting the efforts that we all put in together, so that we still achieve the objectives that we've agreed upon. And in achieving all those objectives, we also have objectives which are designed to be aligned with our mission. So you would call that the mission statement, for example. And to avoid, yes.
Yeah, if I may also give some feedback on that. Do you have in mind any, institution or perhaps any governing bodies who have a template perhaps, or a gold standard when we talk about risk community for CSO, so that it can become a benchmark for all the CSO, the NPO to do their own risk exercise? Because a risk committee, to me, it is quite a luxury for any institution who be able to do that in details. Because mostly for NPOs, they will just run as far and as fast as they can. So
That's right.
to a
That's
certain
right.
extent, they might forego this risk exercise, in which to us it is very critical in making sure that
Mm.
the objectives are being met. So perhaps
Excellent question, Fikri. Yeah, excellent question. So there are a lot of standards out there, and you've answered the question partially in terms of it takes a lot of resources to achieve those standards. First of all, standards are rigorous, right? Because they have all these best practices. And then there's a lot of things you prep. There are lots of committees you need to set up in your organization. But the reality for a lot of organizations, not just in Malaysia, but all over the world, because of how it is structured, because it's voluntary, because resources are just naturally, you are always starved of resources. You always don't have enough resources.
Yep.
And so where are you going to find that budget of energy and time and attention to invest into governance and risk management? So it's always going to be, hey, we are not even going to find the operational budget just to keep the lights on. We're even at risk of not being able to pull off a certain project because budget constraints, liquidity constraints. So there will always be these challenges. And so while standards are really, really important, I see their value. But in the Malaysian context, I often don't really have to ask myself the question, why aren't Malaysian NPOs adopting these standards and these best practices? Like, there are a lot of toolkits available out there, but why aren't they adopting them, right? These are open source free materials that they can take. Well, one, as the questioner earlier that you asked, whose question you posed is, it takes a bit of learning curve. Yeah, it takes a bit of maturity and experience with organizations to actually appreciate the importance of investing time and effort into governance and risk management. It basically means someone who's got a more long-term view. Yeah, someone who's got a more long-term view and understands that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we should prepare for these things. We should build it into our culture, and I'll come to that in a bit. Now, so Fikri, your question is there a standard that we can aspire to? Yes, there are a lot of standards, and there are standards for different types of organizations. Yeah, NPOs come in all shapes and sizes, which is very natural because all causes come in different shapes and sizes, right? Whether it's sexual harassment at the workplace, whether it's children's rights, whether it's advocating for treatment for rare diseases, right? So whether it's fighting for protecting the heritage of indigenous communities. So they're very different causes, they're very different organizations, they exist in very different frameworks and styles and structures. And so there is no one size fit all. But maybe I'm hoping one of the things that we really need to improve on is in decision making, because that is something that involves, how do I say, if you start from the foundation, which is your Jawatan Kuasa, your committee, if they have just this little bit of programming in their heads where they are aware that, hey, that's this governance and risk management that's important, then in making the decisions, and because most of their time is spent making decisions, then hopefully they would also design governance and risk management into their decisions, their day-to-day decisions. So
thank
that's
you. If I may interrupt a bit.
Yes.
Because this topic is quite close to me as well, as I'm also the chairman for Risk Committee for Yayasan Sukarela and Siswa, an agency and the Ministry of Higher Education. So
Yes.
as the chairman for that committee, I also sometimes face some resistance from the other board directors who felt that my approach to risk assessment is too vigorous as far as our institution is concerned, the size of institutions. the way we conduct. Because the way I look into it is risk is pretty much very important. To a certain extent, it might take several months before we can pass a certain project and whatnot. We really need to narrow down every details possible so that we can reduce the gaps of the one that you mentioned, someone who will drop the ball and make sure and end up making the project a failure. So how do we actually convince the rest of board members by making sure that risk is as important as committing to any project?
Right. So we have to, I think the only way to make someone buy into something is to make them want to have it, right? So why would they want to have rigorous governance process? Why would they want to have rigorous risk management SOPs in place? Yeah, Fikri, I think it's always important for them, like sometimes when it gets, the processes are elaborate and rigorous and complicated, then all they see is all the small things and the check boxes that they have to comply with, right? Yeah. And it's very easy in the thick of that to lose sight of these two questions, right? What are we actually governing for and what are we governing against? Yeah. So these are very fundamental questions, like governance. Yeah, very important. Yeah. But what are we actually governing for and what are we governing against? And so the clarity and the focus should really be on that. We're governing for high performance. Now, so Fikri, when you go into high performance, your board listens because they want to perform, right? Yeah. So we are actually governing for high performance. We want to have in place systems which would take all these resources and ensure that when we combine them strategically and intelligently together, they are more than the sum of the parts, right? So that's what we are aiming for. On the other hand, we are governing against. What are we governing against? Yeah. And I would say, at the risk of being very reductive or simplistic, I would say we are governing against human frailty, right? We're all humans, and our organizations is nothing but a group, a blob of human beings all coming together. That's what an organization is. It's not the tables and chairs. It's not the laptops, right? It's not the crummy office that you occupy. It's not, right? It's the humans. It's the group of humans who have their thinking aligned together, right? To the purpose of the organization. That's why they all turned up, right? So, and they turn up as different parts, but they all come together to serve the mission. So an important thing is about being very clear about what the objectives are and being very clear about what are the things that could come in the way of achieving these objectives. And so, a lot of times we hear stories all the time about really bad things happening in organizations. And then we pin it down to, oh, there was that, they had this committee member that was siphoning money, or that Dato was using it for his, personal purpose. And, he was just hijacking the cause, for his own intentions or agenda. Now, but if we zoom out a little bit, if you imagine you're a Martian and you're just analyzing what's happened, it's human frailty, right? And if you dig deeper, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, the people who mismanage or the people who drop the ball succumb to human weakness or human frailty. Because at the end of the day, we're just humans, yeah? We're all humans on different varying paths of personal development, right? And we are all trying our best to be better. Sometimes we don't try so hard. Sometimes we try very hard. We're all in different paths where we are. But the thing is, if you're an organization, and if you're a big one at that, you will have lots of humans, all with their own peculiarities and all on their own journeys. So you should design to govern against human frailty. Not personalities, but systematically. That's why we need to have systems. That's why we need to have procedures, right? Not because we enjoy, or not because we are very negative or cynical, but because we are rational, because we understand this is the business of organizing people together, poses this natural risk. So we are governing for high performance. We are also governing against human fragility, human frailty, for example. Yeah.
If I may,
So
Q,
yes,
if I
Fikri.
may add up follow-up questions to that, right? When we want to do our risk assessment framework, or when do we want to put our procedure in place, right? How do we ensure
How do we ensure that whatever procedure that we have put in place is good enough
and not too
and not
vigorous? What is
too
the
vigorous?
fine
What is
line
the fine
between
line
having
between
a
having
good
a
risk
good risk
procedure
assessment
and
procedure
not
and
too
not
burdensome to certain that will soon jeopardize the implementation of project? For instance, if I go into details, right? For instance, we have decided for any withdrawal, or I would say advancement money for this stuff, we only allow them to carry, for instance, 10,000 ringgit and not 5,000 ringgit. So how do we ensure that that particular much 10,000 ringgit is sufficient enough and not too low or perhaps too high? How do we come about that number? Perhaps you can share.
So I would say always start simple. Always start simple. I think some basic, very practical hallmarks just from experience. Always start simple. Why? Why start simple? Because simple means people can understand, and you need everyone in your organization to understand, because you need everyone to be on the same page to understand why do we have this rule, for example, the 5,000 and the 10,000. Why do we draw the line here, right? So start simple so that everyone understands, so that there is this clarity. Yeah, the simple things have clarity. When you layer them too thick, right? You layer it too thick, then you forget why are we doing this in the first place, because then the details catch all your attention, and you might forget. But so now, how much is too much? That is for each organization, your own culture, to judge at any given one time. Because like the bamboo, right? You are standing in the storm, right? There are good days and then there are stormy days. So you don't want your procedures, your governance and risk management procedures, your frameworks, to be rigid and take up too much bandwidth at challenging times when your organization is really low on resources. When I say resources, like there's no time, we're all very tired, we are all out of ideas, and then there is this big rigid risk management framework that we still have to comply with, which adds to our burdens. So, then all types of issues creep in. Then people start to see not the external challenges that the organization is facing as the thing that you have to deal with, but they start to see your internal frameworks as the enemy, as the problem that they have to overcome. Yeah. So it has to be agile. It has to be adaptable. Yeah. Now, agile and adaptable risk management framework, Fikri, you'll be thinking, cannot, you're right? There must be procedural consistency, isn't it? You cannot say, because that's another problem with human frailty is, when it comes to the chairman, then never mind lah, trust him ma, right? So no need to follow lah. Why insist? Why you insist, right? So procedural consistency is very important in those situations, because there's that natural pressure for non-compliance, right? And so procedural consistency ought to be a feature of risk management framework. And so, i.e., like if there are no good reasons, we should not make exceptions, right? So then it's about having those better conversations. So what is a good reason? So if it's chairman ma, so don't worry. That's not a good reason, right? But we are facing these things. We got no time. We need to make some decisions now. Can we compromise on that? Maybe that's a good decision. So breaking that down into smaller and more finer consideration, it helps, right? Because if you so as long as we remember why we have these frameworks in place. So having your start simple, and then you make them more sophisticated as your organization grows, because your ability to cater for these risks and to cater for good governance will improve as you build up the capacity of your organization. Right. And as you build that up, your framework should then level up. Okay, now let's shoot for a higher standard of risk management, for example. So right. Yes.
Yeah. So in the interest of time, I still have one questions left posed to you.
Okay.
And then perhaps some wrap up from your side before we end.
Okay. All right.
So the last question will be, because I think you have been thought up this idea of decision making quite so much in our discussion. So the organization culture is the soul of a governance, right? And assessing who sit as a decision maker might be tricky as usual, because in the context of NGO type organization, the appointment of those decision maker usually will be of those from close circle of friends or communities, because we don't simply, appoint based on qualification, but most likely when we talk about NPO, CSO, or NGO, they gather themselves within the same close circle. So how can you ensure there's no conflict of interest, there are no issues of governance happening? Taking into context.
I'll jump right into it. That's a super good question, and that's very realistic of NPOs, especially here, because they are usually the small or the mid-sized ones, where or even the big ones, they are still, if you look at the committee members, they have never changed in 20 years, for example, or even 5 years is a long time. So it's still the same committee, and you will see it's the committee, the same clique, the same gang, right? And so when one person makes things a certain way, the other members, they already know, the committee is going to decide this way, all right? So they know, because it's predictable, because they think in a group way. So that is very common, right? And that is a challenge. And I want to pose as a parting on this. One key thing to remember in terms of assessing how safe is my organization is there enough constructive conflict happening in my organization? Leaders, right, among the audience here, ask yourselves that. Ask yourselves, not just like, hey, my organization is so wonderful because everyone always, we have consensus, everyone collaborates and help one another. We're very cooperative. But you also need to ask yourself this: within the organization, am I seeing enough disagreements? Am I hearing in those decision-making processes enough arguments, enough debates, enough friction, healthy friction, right? Where people are wrangling, and I like the word struggling, where people are struggling with each other, right? So the concept of struggle is very important, because as iron sharpens iron, man sharpens man. There's this very old saying. We come together, well, first, it's very nice to have the brotherhood, the camaraderie of being with like-minded people. But then what are we aiming for, right? When we say we're aiming for higher performance, we want to do better, what are we saying? We want to be essentially better versions of ourselves. And if that is the clarity that you have, then that requires humility and the recognition that my eyes cannot see everything, as good as I am, right? So I may have a legal background, so I can see all the legal issues. That's a huge claim, but let's go with that. I can see all the legal issues. Can you see the financial issues? Can you see the commercial challenges? Can you see the people factors, right? So why do we get together in the first place? Why do we form an organization? It's because together we're always better, right? More heads are better than one. So, but the challenge with diversity and plurality is the legal person and the marketing person, very different software in their heads. So what's going to happen is you need to struggle with one another when you're discussing something. At the decision-making table, you need to be struggling. So when you see struggle, it's a good sign. It means, one, you have diversity. Two, you have a process that's perhaps is built towards better decisions because you're getting different views. Yep. Now, that takes effort, that takes bandwidth, but it results in growth. That is the growth mindset. If your meetings are just, hey, let's get around and long time no see, let's just get around and shoot the breeze and talk about the things that we all agree with. And then if you're the Martian, looking again like a fly on the wall, if you think that
Sorry, we have some glitch. We couldn't hear your voice, sorry. Q. Q.
Now, yes.
We couldn't hear your voice just now because there's some incoming calls to your phone.
Oh, yeah. Right. So essentially the litmus test for us is to ask ourselves and observe in a very objective way, observe our organizations and ask ourselves, are we seeing debates? Are we seeing struggles? Are we seeing healthy and open conversations? Yeah. So leaders and committee members in the NPOs, you need to create an environment for constructive conflict. You need to create that environment because you must remember this. That environment will not happen naturally. Yeah, especially kita orang Asia, it's about the way we are brought up. Yeah, at home and in our schools. Don't open your mouth unless you have something smart to say. Right? Don't open your mouth unless you are a master in that topic. Otherwise, you keep quiet and you listen. Listen to the person with more experience. Right? We are very so now, which is why internationally the power distance, i.e. the most powerful person and the least powerful person in organizations, Malaysia, we have very big power distance. Now, big power distance means when you have an idea down here, it's very hard for you to communicate that to the people up there because, well, for various reasons. And if I'm talking to decision makers in NPOs, maybe you feel too confident about your ability. Maybe you feel too confident with your experience. You feel that I've seen it before. So you're not really listening. Yeah. So essentially in another kind of word to put it is you're not really in a growth mindset, right? You might say you all must be in a growth mindset, but I know best, right? So that would be a challenge. And so in ending, maybe in Fikri, I'm mindful of time. In ending, yes, governance and risk management frameworks are very important, but those things can only come into an organization and take root in culture is humility in the hearts of the leaders and the management team. Yeah, humility. And then because once the top people, you have humility, the people that they are leading will also have humility. It's important that everyone has humility because we all suffer from. Now, I really recommend Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. He's recently won the Nobel Prize for his amazing work in psychology, right? Understanding how we make decisions, right? So he says, beware of that notion of what you see is all there is. WYSIATI, YCAT. Believing that what you see is all there is. So I know. And then from that very predetermined position, you make decisions. Now that's very dangerous and that's very harmful for yourself and for others, especially if you're in positions of responsibility. Now, a much older piece of literature, Joseph Warton would have said, in an infinity of things mutually relative, a mind that cannot see infinitely can see nothing fully. So never believe that you can see everything and act like that. So key takeaways, Fikri, if I may, would be
Quick.
Let's have some clarity. Yeah, very quick one. Huh? So some clarity on decision making. What are the organs? What are the processes? Who's at the table, right? Have awareness about the obstacles and what's the key condition, the critical success factors of good decision making. Always invite people to come and struggle. Welcome constructive conflict. Create the environment that allows for struggle and conflict. And then from there, you improve your governance and risk management framework. Procedural consistency is very important, but always with a dose of flexibility and agility along the correct factors, and repeat, right? Because it's always a continuous effort, all right? There's no such thing as, we've done a wonderful looking framework, we can now rest. It's never like that. So yes, that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Steve, for the sharing. I think we have learned a lot throughout your session. So we thank you in advance for your sharing this now. Yeah, and
it's a pleasure. I wish everyone all the best in their work in the voluntary sector.
Thank you.
Keep themselves safe. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially in this COVID-19 area.
Yes. Alrighty.
We would like to call all community builders to register yourself at the My CSO Empowerment Program, which will be held on the 15th, 16th, 17th November of 2020. You may refer to the registration link on the bottom right of the screen. And GLOBES is co-organized by the International Islamic University of Malaysia and Philandure, sponsored by Bank Islam Malaysia, supported by All Party Parliamentary Group Malaysia and CSO-SDG Alliance. So also don't forget to like the official Facebook page, GLOBES, GLOBS, and share this live session with your friends and family. We shall